James Alder had always lived a life built around discipline, calmness, and tradition. As a member of the British Royal Guard, he carried himself with a level of seriousness that made people stop and stare. Every day he stood tall in his polished uniform, never losing focus, no matter what was happening around him. Visitors admired him. Children pointed at him with wonder. Tourists tried to make him smile, but his expression remained still and strong, exactly as he was trained to do. From the outside, people often believed that being a royal guard was mostly about standing still and looking impressive. But those who understood the truth knew that the job required an unusual mix of strength, concentration, and responsibility. James had spent years mastering these skills. He trained early in the morning, marched long distances, kept his uniform perfect, and learned how to stay calm even when crowds grew loud or unpredictable. Everything about him showed dedication. Even though he rarely spoke about himself, his fellow guards respected him deeply. They knew he never complained, even when the weather was cold or his feet felt tired from hours of standing. He was reliable, steady, and always prepared. Some younger guards even saw him as a role model, someone who proved that quiet determination could be stronger than loud confidence. One day, during a joint training event between British forces and visiting American personnel, James met an American soldier named Tyler Mason. Tyler was friendly, energetic, and full of stories about the U.S. Army. He loved talking about the different types of fitness tests they trained for. He described exercises that pushed the body in completely new ways: heavy lifts, timed runs, strength drills, and teamwork activities. James listened politely, curious but quiet. After a while, Tyler laughed and said, "You Royal Guards look strong, but I wonder how one of you would do on our Army combat fitness test. It's a pretty tough one." He said it with a friendly smile, but the words still caught James's attention. It wasn't a challenge meant to insult him. It was more like a spark of friendly curiosity. The other guards nearby also seemed interested. Some of them raised their eyebrows, as if imagining how different the American test must be from their own routines. James wasn't the type to show excitement easily, but inside, something awakened. He had spent years perfecting ceremonial skills, standing still with perfect posture, and mastering routines that required both physical and mental strength. But he had never tried anything like the American test Tyler was talking about. The idea felt new, almost refreshing. "I wouldn't mind giving it a try," James said quietly, surprising everyone, even himself. Tyler's eyes widened with excitement. "Really? You want to take the test? I can arrange it. We're doing it again next month." It could be fun. Fun wasn't exactly the word James would have chosen, but he nodded anyway. Something about the idea felt right. He saw it not as a competition but as a chance to learn something different, to test himself in a new environment, and to represent the Royal Guard in a positive way. Word traveled quickly among his fellow guards. Some of them encouraged him, telling him he would do great because he had always been strong and focused. Others were more unsure, reminding him that the American test involved activities they didn't train for, like throwing weights or moving quickly through obstacle-style drills. Still, everyone was curious. They wanted to see how far James could go. As the days passed, James thought more and more about the upcoming test. He wondered what it would feel like to train for something outside of his normal schedule. His daily routine was already strict, but now he needed to add new exercises, new motions, and new goals. He visited the base gym and watched videos showing how the American soldiers prepared for their test. Each movement looked unfamiliar, not impossible, but certainly different. With permission from his superiors, James began practicing on his own. He started small, focusing on basic strength moves and simple technique. He wanted to understand the body mechanics behind each part of the test. The first time he tried to throw a weighted ball, it flew only a short distance, and he felt slightly embarrassed even though no one was watching. He tried again and again, each time learning something new about balance, grip, and timing. He wasn't used to this kind of training. The Royal Guard emphasized endurance, posture, and precise marching skills, all extremely important, but they didn't include things like lifting heavy bars or sprinting while pulling equipment. James quickly learned that this new challenge was going to test him in more ways than he expected. Still, he did not get discouraged. In fact, the difficulty made him more determined. Every evening, after finishing his regular duties, he returned to the training area. Step by step, he improved. His throws grew stronger, his lifts became smoother, his sprinting form sharpened. His confidence started to build slowly, not through pride, but through quiet awareness that he was growing. His fellow guards noticed his new routine. Some stopped by to watch him practice, offering light-hearted comments or cheering him on when he completed a complex movement for the first time. "You'll shock them," one of them said with a grin. "The Americans won't know what hit them." James smiled politely at the encouragement. Even though he wasn't trying to impress anyone, he simply wanted to give his best. The officers overseeing his training were impressed by his willingness to learn something so different. They admired how seriously he took the challenge. Even though it was voluntary, James didn't think of it as proving anything. For him, it was about discipline, respect, and curiosity about another country's training style. He knew that by taking the test, he was not only representing himself but also the history and standards of the Royal Guard. As the test day grew closer, James felt a mix of calmness and anticipation. He wasn't nervous. He had been trained too long and too well to let unease control him. But he did feel something almost exciting, a rare feeling he didn't experience in his everyday duties. He was stepping into a new environment, surrounded by people who worked differently than he did, and he was eager to see how his skills would translate. At night, he sometimes imagined the test layout, the stations, the instructors, the unfamiliar equipment. He wondered what the American soldiers expected from a Royal Guard. Did they think he would struggle? Did they imagine he spent all day standing still? Or did they secretly believe he might surprise them? The truth was, James didn't care what anyone expected. He only cared about doing the test honestly and respectfully. He wanted to show that dedication could break boundaries between different styles of training. He wanted to learn something new about himself. On the final week before the test, he practiced each movement with more confidence. His posture remained as upright and steady as his Royal Guard training had taught him. But now his body moved with an added layer of readiness. His arms felt stronger, his legs more responsive, his breathing more controlled during intense movements. He felt prepared, not perfect, but prepared. In moments of reflection, James understood that this challenge was more than a fitness test. It was an exchange of respect between two forces. It was an opportunity to show how discipline could bridge different traditions. It was a reminder that strength came in many forms, not just through muscle, but through mindset, commitment, and the willingness to step outside one's comfort zone. By the time the final day of preparation arrived, everyone in his unit knew the date of his test. Some jokingly placed tiny predictions about how well he might do, while others simply wished him good luck with genuine kindness. James thanked each of them with quiet gratitude. He didn't seek attention, but he appreciated the support more than he could express. When he went to sleep the night before the test, he felt a sense of peace. He had trained with honesty. He had learned something new. And now all that remained was to show up and give everything he had. Whatever the outcome, he knew he had grown from the experience. And that, for James Alder, was already a reward of its own. James Alder woke up the morning after accepting the challenge with a new sense of purpose. His routine usually felt predictable. Early wake-up, uniform inspection, ceremonial practice, quiet meals, and well-structured drills. But now, every part of his day carried an added spark. He wasn't just a Royal Guard preparing for duty. He was a man preparing for something unfamiliar, something he had never tried before. And that thought alone made everything feel fresh and slightly exciting. The first step was understanding the American training style more deeply. The U.S. soldiers shared videos, demonstration guides, and written descriptions of each part of their fitness test. James studied them carefully, almost like a student preparing for an important exam. He watched each movement frame by frame, noticing every detail where the feet were placed, how the hands moved, how the body stayed balanced. He didn't want to rush. He wanted to learn the right way. The more he watched, the more he realized how different the American exercises were compared to what he had done for years. The Royal Guard training built endurance, stability, and posture. It made a person steady and composed for long periods of time. But the American test seemed to focus on power, speed, and quick reactions. It involved lifting weights off the ground, moving equipment rapidly, and completing short bursts of intense movement. James found this difference fascinating rather than intimidating. He understood that every type of training made sense within its own system. The Royal Guard needed composure for ceremonial duties. The American soldiers used dynamic movements to stay ready for a wide range of tasks. Both were valid. Both required dedication, and now he would get to combine both worlds in his own experience. During the first few days of practicing, James kept his expectations modest. He didn't want to push too hard, too fast. He preferred learning slowly and understanding each movement carefully before adding intensity. His approach made sense to him. He believed that good technique formed a strong foundation for improvement. So, he began with something simple: warming up properly. He stretched his arms, legs, and back gently. He walked in circles around the training area to loosen his muscles. Once he felt ready, he tried some of the exercises he had seen in the videos. The first exercise he attempted was the standing power throw, an activity where he had to toss a weighted ball behind him. When he tried it for the first time, the ball didn't travel very far. It lifted off the ground awkwardly and landed sooner than he expected. James didn't react with frustration. Instead, he paused, replayed the movement in his mind, and tried again. His second attempt was smoother, though still not impressive. But progress, no matter how small, encouraged him. His fellow guards noticed his efforts. Some passed by casually and smiled. Others stood quietly to observe, curious to see how he was adapting. They didn't tease him or discourage him. Instead, they seemed genuinely interested. They knew this was something unusual for a Royal Guard to attempt. One afternoon, while James practiced lifting a weighted bar, a younger guard named Oliver approached him. Oliver admired James greatly and respected his quiet strength. "Sir," he said gently, "you're doing great. The way you stay focused is inspiring." James didn't often receive compliments, so he simply nodded with a soft smile. "Thank you," he said. "I'm learning something new every day." Oliver watched as James lifted the bar again, slow and steady, making sure each movement was controlled. "It looks hard," Oliver said. "It is different," James replied. "But different is not bad. It simply means there is something to learn." Those words stayed with Oliver long after he walked away. In fact, they stayed with many of the guards who observed James's journey. It reminded them that even someone already skilled and respected could still choose to learn something completely new. And that made them admire James even more. As the days went on, James added more activities to his routine. He practiced sprinting between marked points, dragging light weights behind him to simulate the American sprint drag carry event. Even though the weights weren't as heavy as the actual test, they still challenged his balance and speed. The first few attempts left him slightly breathless, but he never looked discouraged. Instead, he took a moment, breathed deeply, and repeated the movement again. Slowly, he improved his timing. His steps became lighter, and his pace became quicker. What impressed the guards most was not James's physical progress but his mindset. He never treated the challenge as a competition. He never spoke about outperforming anyone. He simply focused on doing his best. To him, the test wasn't about showing off. It was about exploring a new type of discipline. During one training session, an officer from his unit approached him privately. "James," the officer began, "I want you to know that we are proud of your efforts. You are representing the Royal Guard with dignity." James bowed his head respectfully. "Thank you, sir. I'm grateful for the opportunity to learn. And no matter how the test goes," the officer continued, "you've already shown something meaningful that we can grow by trying things outside our comfort zone." James appreciated those words more than he could express. They added a quiet confidence in his heart that stayed with him during his training. Over the next week, James noticed changes in his body. His arms felt stronger when he lifted weights. His legs responded more quickly during sprints. His breathing adjusted to short bursts of intense activity. He felt more capable, more aware of his body's rhythm. But physical change wasn't the only thing he experienced. His mind grew sharper too. Every new movement required concentration. Every improvement required patience. Day by day, he found himself enjoying the challenge more. It wasn't easy, but it was meaningful. The other guards sometimes joined him for light practice sessions. They laughed, shared small tips, and admired James's seriousness. One of them jokingly said, "If you do too well on the American test, they might try to recruit you." Everyone chuckled softly at the idea, including James. Even though the comment was made in good humor, James made it clear, "I am proud to serve where I am. This is simply a journey of learning." His gentle but firm response made the guards nod with respect. As the date of the test approached, James carefully adjusted his training. He no longer practiced excessively. He knew the value of rest and recovery. Some days, he focused on light stretching. Other days, he practiced technique rather than intensity. His goal was not to exhaust himself before the test, but to arrive prepared, calm, and ready. The American soldiers who had originally introduced the idea checked in with him occasionally. Tyler Mason, the cheerful soldier who had made the friendly remark that started everything, often visited James to observe his progress. He watched James move through the exercises with quiet determination. "You're doing amazing," Tyler said one day. "Honestly, I think you'll surprise everyone." James didn't let the praise go to his head. He simply smiled modestly. "I am doing my best," he replied. "That is all anyone can do." Tyler nodded with appreciation. "Your attitude is incredible. No wonder your fellow guards respect you so much." By this point, nearly everyone on the base knew about James's upcoming test. Some were excited to see how a Royal Guard would perform. Others were simply impressed that he was willing to try something so different. The atmosphere felt supportive, warm, and encouraging, exactly the kind of environment James appreciated. The night before the final week of training began, James took a quiet walk around the base. He liked the stillness of the evening. It reminded him of the calm he practiced every day on duty, standing tall and composed. Now, that same calm helped him prepare for the American test. He knew the path ahead was challenging, but he felt ready in his heart. He had trained with honesty, embraced new methods with respect, and learned more about himself than he expected. He understood that true strength wasn't only about muscles or speed. It was also about humility, curiosity, and the willingness to grow. By the end of part 2, James stood at a point where he had fully stepped outside his comfort zone. He didn't know what the final result would be, but he knew he was prepared to face the test with dignity, courage, and a calm heart, qualities he carried from the Royal Guard into every new challenge he met. The morning of the test arrived with a soft, cool breeze. James Alder woke up earlier than usual. Even before his alarm, his room felt unusually quiet, as if the world around him understood the importance of the day. He dressed calmly, his movements slow and steady. Though he wasn't nervous, he felt the weight of anticipation resting gently on his shoulders. Today was the day he would attempt the U.S. Army fitness test. Something completely different from anything he had done before. As he prepared, he reminded himself of one simple truth. He wasn't here to compete with anyone. He wasn't here to prove who was better. He was here to challenge himself, learn something new, and represent the Royal Guard with dignity. That thought kept him centered. After a light breakfast, he stepped outside toward the transport area. A few Royal Guards were waiting for him. They weren't required to be there so early, but they came anyway. Some gave him encouraging smiles. Others gave him respectful nods. One of them said softly, "You've got this, James." Another added, "We believe in you." Their words warmed his heart. He gave them a grateful smile before boarding the vehicle that would take him to the American base, where the test would take place. When he arrived, the atmosphere felt lively. Groups of American soldiers were already warming up. stretching, jogging lightly, and preparing equipment. Some of them noticed James stepping out of the vehicle. Their expressions shifted from curiosity to surprise. Many had heard about the Royal Guard who wanted to take their fitness test, but seeing him in person made the moment feel real. Tyler Mason, the friendly American soldier who had first mentioned the test, ran over with a bright smile. "James, you made it. Are you ready?" "As ready as I can be," James replied calmly. Tyler noticed the quiet confidence in his voice and nodded with excitement. "You're going to do great. Everyone here is curious to see how you perform." The test area was divided into several stations, each marked with bright cones and neatly arranged equipment. Instructors stood at their positions, holding clipboards and stopwatches. They looked professional and focused. Some whispered quietly among themselves, likely discussing the Royal Guard who would be participating. But none of them seemed unfriendly, just curious. James walked to the warm-up area where an instructor greeted him politely. "Good morning. Thank you for joining us today. Take your time to warm up." James gave a respectful nod and began stretching his arms, legs, and back. He jogged lightly in place, breathing deeply. His years of training helped him feel grounded, even in a new environment. The noise around him, the clinking of weights, the chatter of soldiers, the movement of people didn't distract him. His focus remained steady. Once the warm-up was over, the first event was announced: the 3-repetition maximum deadlift. The goal was to lift a weighted bar 3 times with proper form. For many American soldiers, this was a regular part of their training. For James, it was something he had practiced only for a few weeks. As he stepped toward the bar, several soldiers gathered nearby, curious to watch. Tyler gave him a thumbs up from the side. The instructor explained the rules clearly, and James listened attentively. He placed his hands on the bar, feeling the cool metal beneath his fingertips. He took a deep breath, steadying his mind. Then he lifted. The bar rose smoothly, almost gracefully, surprising the spectators. He lowered it carefully and repeated the motion. 3 clean repetitions, no struggle, no hesitation. Some of the American soldiers exchanged looks. One whispered, "He's stronger than he looks." Another said, "That form was perfect." And James didn't react to the comments. He simply stepped back quietly once the instructor confirmed his successful lift. Inside, he felt a small spark of satisfaction, but he kept his expression calm. The next event was the standing power throw. James walked to the throwing area, where a weighted ball waited. He had practiced this movement many times, though it had taken him a while to understand the technique. The instructor demonstrated once more, then stepped aside. James held the ball, feeling its weight. He positioned his feet carefully, swung his arms back, and threw the ball behind him with all the strength and technique he could gather. The ball traveled much farther than anyone expected. A small ripple of surprised gasps moved through the crowd. One soldier even murmured, "Wow, I didn't think he'd throw it that far." James didn't smile proudly or high-five anyone. He simply nodded at the instructor's approval and stepped aside, staying as humble as ever. Next came the hand-release push-ups. James lowered himself to the ground and waited for the signal. When it came, he moved with smooth, controlled rhythm. His form straight and steady. He didn't rush. He didn't try to outdo anyone. He simply followed the proper pace and completed the required number with impressive endurance. Once again, the instructors exchanged looks of admiration. The American soldiers started whispering among themselves, this time not out of doubt but out of genuine respect. But it was the 4th event, the sprint drag carry, that truly changed the atmosphere. This was considered one of the most challenging parts of the test. It involved quick movement, coordination, and bursts of effort. Many soldiers expected James to struggle here, not because they doubted him, but because even they found this event tough. James stepped into position. The instructor gave him a clear rundown of the sequence. Sprint down and back, drag the equipment, run laterally, carry weights, and sprint again. When the whistle blew, James shot forward with impressive speed. His steps were light, controlled, and precise. Every movement looked deliberate, almost elegant. When he dragged the equipment, he leaned into the motion with steady strength, not jerking or forcing it. His lateral run was clean and balanced. When he lifted the kettlebells for the carry, his posture remained upright, showing the influence of his Royal Guard training. By the time he finished the final sprint, several soldiers were watching with wide eyes. Tyler couldn't contain himself. "That was amazing," he said loudly. Other soldiers nodded in agreement. One of them muttered, "He beat my time." The instructors writing on their clipboards looked equally surprised. They weren't expecting someone trained for ceremonial duties to move like that. But James showed that discipline came in many forms. Though his breathing quickened, he didn't collapse or bend over. He simply inhaled deeply, calming himself as he always did during intense moments. With each event completed, the respect around him grew. At first, the American soldiers had watched with casual curiosity, but now they watched with admiration. Some even clapped softly after his performances, not because it was a competition but because they appreciated his effort and skill. The last part of the test required endurance, a longer run. As James lined up for this final challenge, the sun rose gently overhead, warming the field. The atmosphere was no longer filled with doubt or speculation. Instead, it was filled with encouragement. "Go, James!" someone shouted. "You've got this," another added. James didn't run with showmanship. His pace remained steady, his posture elegant, his breathing controlled. The Royal Guard training helped him stay calm even when his muscles began to ache. Step by step, he moved forward, refusing to rush or panic. By the time he crossed the finish line, his uniform was lightly damp with sweat, but his expression remained composed. There was a moment of silence, then a wave of applause spread across the field. Not loud or wild, but genuine and heartfelt. The soldiers respected what they had seen. The instructors respected it even more. James simply bowed his head slightly in gratitude. He had completed the test with all the sincerity in his heart. He had not tried to impress or outperform anyone. He had simply done his best. And to everyone watching, that alone was more impressive than any score. James stood quietly while the instructors collected the score sheets. The warm sunlight gently touched the field, and the breeze cooled the atmosphere. Around him, American soldiers chatted in excited tones, their voices filled with curiosity and admiration. Some kept glancing at James, still surprised by how smoothly he had completed every part of the test. A few even looked inspired, as if watching him had encouraged them to push themselves harder in the future. James did not let the attention affect him. He stood with calm posture, hands resting lightly behind his back, the same way he often stood while on duty. His breathing slowly returned to normal. Even though he had worked hard, he did not show exhaustion. Years of discipline had taught him how to handle both physical and mental stress with quiet elegance. Tyler walked over to him with a wide smile. "James, that was incredible," he said, unable to hide his excitement. "You didn't just do well, you exceeded expectations." James offered a polite, modest smile. "Thank you. I am simply glad I was able to complete it." "Oh, you didn't just complete it," Tyler replied, shaking his head. "You surprised everyone. I think half the base is still in shock." James looked slightly amused at that thought, though he kept his reaction gentle and reserved. He didn't train to shock anyone. He trained to respect the challenge. But hearing how others felt made him appreciate his effort even more. The instructors gathered a short distance away, comparing notes and discussing results. They spoke quietly, but their expressions revealed that something unusual had occurred. One of them pointed at James's sprint drag carry time, looking genuinely impressed. Another tapped his clipboard with a smile. They looked like they were witnessing something they hadn't expected today. Finally, the lead instructor stepped forward, holding the final score sheet. His expression was calm, but his eyes carried a trace of amazement. The soldiers around James fell silent, waiting to hear the results. Tyler crossed his arms proudly, as if he already knew James had done exceptionally well. James stood upright, Prepared to accept whatever score he received, high or low. He was content knowing he had done his best. The instructor cleared his throat gently. "James Alder," he began, "your performance today has been remarkable." A quiet murmur spread through the small crowd. James remained still, listening intently. The instructor continued, "Not only have you passed every event, but you have achieved one of the highest overall scores recorded here this month." Gasps rippled across the group. A few American soldiers looked at each other in disbelief. One even whispered, "No way," while another said, "He beat some of our regulars." James blinked slowly, processing the information. He had not come to break records. He had come to challenge himself. The idea that he had placed among the top scores of the month felt almost surreal, but he remained composed, nodding respectfully at the instructor's words. "It's especially impressive considering you don't usually train for these types of activities," the instructor added, with a sincere smile. "Your sprint drag carry time, in particular, was outstanding." That comment drew more reactions. Several soldiers shook their heads, still amazed. Someone said, "He moved like he's been doing this for years." Another added, "I thought he'd struggle, but he was faster than half of us." James felt a warm sense of gratitude. Though he kept his emotions balanced, he didn't want to appear boastful. He simply said, "Thank you. I appreciate the opportunity to try your test. It has taught me a great deal." The instructor nodded. "And you have taught us something as well," he said. "You've shown that dedication and discipline can bring success even in unfamiliar environments." Tyler clapped James on the shoulder gently. "This is amazing. I knew you'd do well, but this is beyond anything I expected." James smiled faintly. "I am glad to hear that." As the applause around him continued, a small group of American soldiers approached to congratulate him personally. They shook his hand, expressed their respect, and complimented his focus. None of them sounded jealous or annoyed. Their admiration was genuine. One soldier said, "I wish I had your control. You stayed calm the entire time." Another added with a laugh, "If standing still for hours helps build that kind of focus, maybe we should try it too." James chuckled softly. "It is not as easy as it looks," he replied kindly. The mood on the field had shifted completely. Earlier, people had viewed him as a quiet visitor trying something new. Now, they saw him as someone who had earned their respect through effort, humility, and strength of character. The British guards who had accompanied James stepped forward with proud smiles. They didn't shout or cheer loudly, but their expressions showed how proud they felt. Their eyes sparkled with admiration. They had always respected James for his dedication at home, but now they saw him shine in an entirely different environment. One of them said softly, "We knew you'd do well, James." Another added with a gentle grin, "You've given us something to talk about for weeks." James appreciated their words. He felt grateful to represent the Royal Guard in such a positive way. To him, their pride mattered more than any score. Tyler stepped beside him again. "You know," he said jokingly but with genuine admiration, "if you ever wanted to join the U.S. Army, I'm sure they'd welcome you with open arms." James raised an eyebrow slightly, amused by the idea. "I am honored by the thought," he said calmly. "But I am proud to serve where I am, and we're proud you came here." Tyler replied with a smile. Soon after, one of the instructors asked James if he would stand for a photo with the group. James agreed politely. They gathered in front of the training field, smiling warmly. James stood at the center, relaxed yet graceful, while the American soldiers positioned themselves beside him. The atmosphere felt friendly and respectful, filled with a sense of connection between the two forces. After the photo, James took a moment to reflect on everything that had happened. He remembered how unfamiliar the exercises had felt when he first practiced them. He remembered doubting whether his ceremonial training would translate into more dynamic movements. And now, standing on the field with proud faces surrounding him, he realized something important. Stepping outside his comfort zone had allowed him to discover new strengths he never knew he had. The American soldiers continued chatting excitedly, some joking that they needed to improve their own scores now that James had set such a high example. Others said they wanted to try standing and marching the way the Royal Guards did, to understand the discipline behind it. James found these reactions touching. He had come to learn, but he had also inspired others without even trying. As the event slowly wrapped up, Tyler walked with him toward the base exit. Both men walked calmly, enjoying the sense of accomplishment in the air. "I hope you know," Tyler said thoughtfully, "that today wasn't just a test. It was a connection between two different worlds." James nodded gently. "I believe so," he replied. "And I am grateful for it. You've changed how many of our soldiers see the Royal Guard," Tyler continued. "They didn't realize how strong and focused you all truly are." James paused, then said softly, "Strength comes in many forms. Today, I learned that more clearly than ever." Tyler smiled warmly. "Well, the results were shocking," he said jokingly. James chuckled. "Perhaps a little," he admitted, but deep inside, he knew the truth. The results mattered less than the journey. What meant the most to him was the respect shared between two different groups of soldiers, tied together by effort, curiosity, and admiration. The test was over, but the impact would last much longer. When James Alder returned to the British base after completing the American fitness test, the atmosphere felt completely different than when he had left earlier that morning. People who usually only nodded politely now smiled warmly when they saw him. Others who rarely spoke much came forward to greet him. News traveled fast, faster than James would have ever expected. Before he even stepped fully inside the building, one of the guards joked, "Here comes the man who shocked the Americans." James responded with a gentle smile, not wanting the attention but appreciating their good spirits. He didn't see himself as someone who had accomplished something extraordinary. He simply believed he had taken on a challenge with sincerity. But everyone around him saw something more. They saw a man who had represented them with quiet strength and humility. As he walked through the hallway, several guards approached him, asking how the test had gone. When he answered with his usual calmness, someone commented, "Only James would say it so simply." "You did amazing," we all heard. Another guard added with admiration, "The Americans couldn't stop talking about you. They said your performance was one of the best." James could only reply modestly, "I am grateful for their kindness." Later that evening, the British officers invited James for a brief meeting. He stood before them as they shared their appreciation for his effort. "We are proud of you," one officer said warmly, "not because of the score, but because of your attitude. You approached the challenge with dignity, respect, and determination. That reflects the Royal Guard's values." James bowed slightly. "Thank you, sir. I only wished to give my best." "And you did," another officer responded with a smile. Word of his achievement continued spreading over the next few days. Some guards who usually stayed quiet around James now approached him openly, eager to hear details about the test. They listened with interest, asking questions about the sprint drag carry event, the weighted throw, and the longer run. James explained each part patiently, his voice calm and humble, never once speaking in a boastful tone. Because of his experience, many younger guards felt motivated to train more consistently. They told him that watching him take on a completely different kind of challenge had inspired them to try harder in their own routines. One of them even said, "You've shown us that we can grow beyond what we think we know." James appreciated these words deeply. He had not intended to inspire anyone, but knowing that his journey encouraged others filled him with a quiet sense of fulfillment. Meanwhile, across the ocean at the American base, the story continued spreading as well. Many soldiers talked about the Royal Guard who had completed their fitness test with impressive results. Tyler Mason received countless questions from his fellow soldiers, all wanting to know what James was like in person. "He's one of the calmest people you'll ever meet," Tyler would say proudly, "and one of the most dedicated." The respect between the two forces grew because of this simple event. The Americans admired the discipline and posture of the Royal Guards, and the British Guards grew curious about the dynamic training methods used by the American soldiers. What began as a friendly comment between two men had become a bridge connecting people across countries. A few weeks after the test, James received a message from Tyler. In it, Tyler wrote, "You may not realize it, but your visit made a big difference here. The soldiers have been training harder ever since. You inspired them, without even trying. Thank you for being the kind of person who leads quietly." James read the message with a soft smile. It was hard for him to imagine that his simple participation in a test had influenced so many people. But he appreciated the kindness behind Tyler's words. Around this time, the British base received an invitation from the Americans. An offer for a small group of Royal Guards to visit again, for a friendly training exchange. Many believed that James's performance played a big role in making that invitation possible. Officers from both sides wanted to learn from each other, share techniques, and grow together. James felt honored when he learned he would be part of that exchange program. He didn't feel he deserved extra recognition, but he was grateful for the chance to continue learning. He knew that training alongside the American soldiers again would allow him to explore new skills and strengthen the bond between their forces. Before the exchange took place, James began helping younger guards who wanted to improve their fitness. He didn't run official training sessions. Instead, he simply shared his experiences when asked. He encouraged them to work gradually, focus on technique, and remain patient with themselves. One of his favorite things to say was, "Improvement comes from small steps, not sudden leaps." His calm, gentle approach made others trust him even more. As the day of the joint training event approached, the atmosphere around the base became lively with anticipation. Many guards were excited to work with the Americans again. Some wanted to try the fitness test themselves, encouraged by James's success. Others were simply eager to meet soldiers from another country and exchange stories. When the day finally came, James and the selected guards traveled to the American base once again. The moment they arrived, they were greeted warmly. Tyler ran up to James, laughing with happiness. "There he is. Our star visitor has returned." James laughed softly. "I am just James," he replied. "Sure," Tyler said playfully, "but you're still the guy who shocked half the base." The training exchange began with stretching and warm-ups. American soldiers demonstrated new drills while the British guards shared some of their own techniques. Laughter filled the air as each group tried the other's routines. Some found the American exercises surprisingly tricky, while others found the British drills challenging in a whole different way. Throughout the event, James moved gracefully between groups, answering questions, assisting where needed, and participating quietly. He didn't try to stand out, yet everyone noticed his presence because of the calm confidence he carried. One moment during the exchange stood out clearly, when a young American soldier approached James shyly and said, "I watched your test videos. You inspired me to train harder." "Thank you," James responded with genuine warmth. "I am glad to hear that. Keep training with patience. You will surprise yourself." By the end of the day, the two groups had bonded even more deeply. They shared meals together, laughed about their different training habits, and talked about the importance of respect and teamwork. The connection between them felt sincere and lasting. When James returned to the British base, he felt proud not of his performance, but of the unity that had grown from it. Something that started as a simple challenge had blossomed into friendship and cooperation. It showed that one person's effort, no matter how modest, could create positive change. He returned to his regular duties with the same calm, focused spirit he always had. But something inside him had grown. He felt stronger, not just physically, but emotionally. He had learned that stepping beyond familiar boundaries could open doors to new experiences, new friendships, and new understanding. Visitors continued to walk past him during his guard duties. They admired his uniform, his posture, and his calm presence. None of them knew about the American fitness test or the respect he had earned across countries. And James didn't mind. He didn't need the world to know his story. He carried the experience quietly, like a treasured memory. A reminder that true strength came from trying, learning, and respecting others. And though his face remained still as he stood on duty, his heart carried a quiet smile, one that came from knowing he had made a difference simply by being himself.